Loom Knitting 101, how to knit the twisted purl stitch for the loom. For today's tutorial, you will need a knitting loom. Today we will be using the Kiss regular gauge knitting loom with one spacer in between the pins and the pegs, your knitting tools, and a ball of yarn. Today we will be using Manos Wool Classica 100% hand spun wool in the color granite.
The twisted purl stitch isn't used very often in loom knitting, but it's still important to understand the difference between that and a regular purl stitch. The twisted purl stitch is also referred to as purling through the back loop, and it creates the exact opposite of the twisted knit stitch, just like the purl stitch is the back of the knit stitch. To knit the twisted purl stitch, you'll first cast on your desired number of stitches, and then when you get to the stitch that you want to do the twisted purl stitch on, which is going to be this one in this example, you're going to bring your yarn around and basically treat it as if you're purling. So you're going to go under this loop, scoop up the new stitch, bring it through so you have this new loop here, and slide off the old stitch. But before you set this stitch down, you would normally set it down like this. Before you do that, you're going to take your handle and you're going to rotate it clockwise, and then set it down on the stitch. This creates a twist in the stitch, so you'll see instead of this coming out in a U, it's actually coming out with a cross behind it. And you always want to make sure that the yarn that's working towards your new stitches is the yarn that sits on top of this cross. So when you're working right to left, like we are in this example, you will always rotate clockwise. So we'll do another one. Scooping this up. We're going to rotate and then set it down. Now, if you were working left to right, you're actually going to rotate counterclockwise. So it's important to pay attention to which way you're working when you do the stitch. There's another way that you can actually create the twisted knit stitch as well if you feel like this way is too complicated to remember, or you prefer the other way. So what you'll do is you'll pick up this stitch, the next stitch in your row, hold it in back of your work, bring your working yarn around an E-wrap, and then you'll want to take this old stitch and set it back down on the peg, and then you'll purl the new stitch and set it down. This creates the exact same thing, it's just a different technique. I prefer the other way because this way it just seems a lot more complicated and takes a lot more time. So I usually do it the way where we twist it with the knitting tool before we set down the loop. But you can do either way. To knit the twisted purl stitch when you're working left to right this time, you're going to rotate your knitting tool counterclockwise instead of clockwise. So we're going to go scoop this up as if to purl it and slide off the old stitch, and then this time we're going to rotate counterclockwise like this and set the stitch down. So do that again, scoop it up. We've got our new stitch. Slide off the old stitch, rotate counterclockwise, and set the new stitch down. This will create a cross going the opposite direction. So same thing as last time. You want the cross that sits on top, the yarn that sits on top here, to be the one that's headed towards your new stitches that you need to make, so the unworked portion of your project.
And that's how you knit the twisted purl stitch for the loom. Want more loom knitting tutorials? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and follow our blog at vintagestorehouse.com to get new videos and posts sent right to your inbox. Thanks for watching!